One of my favorite books I own is Mitch Albom's The Five People You Meet in Heaven. Yes, even a non-believer likes the story. The end. This is a story about a man named Eddie, and it begins at the end, with Eddie dying in the sun. It might seem strange to start a story with an ending, but all endings are also beginnings. We just don't know them at the time. The last hour of Eddie's life was spent, like most of the others, at Ruby Pier, by a great gray ocean. The park had the usual attractions: a boardwalk, a Ferris wheel, roller coasters, bumper cars, a taffy stand, and an arcade where you could shoot streams of water into a clown's mouth. It also had a big new ride called Freddy's Free Fall, and this would be where Eddie would be killed in an accident that would make newspapers around the state. At the time of his death, Eddie was a squat, white-haired old man with a short neck, a barrel chest, thick forearms, and a faded army tattoo on his right shoulder. His legs were thin and vain now. His left knee, wounded in the war, was ruined by arthritis. He used a cane to get around. His face was broad and cranky from the sun, with salty whiskers and a lower jaw that protruded slightly, making him look prouder than he felt. He kept a cigarette behind his left ear and a ring of keys hooked to his belt. He wore rubber-soled shoes. He wore an old linen cap. His pale brown uniform suggested a working man, and a working man he was. Eddie's job was maintaining the rides, which really meant keeping them safe. Every afternoon, he walked to the park, checking on each attraction from the tilt-a-whirl to the pipeline plunge. He looked for broken boards, loose bolts, worn-out steel. Sometimes he would stop, his eyes glancing over, and people walking past thought something was wrong. But he was listening, that's all. After all these years, he could hear trouble, he said, in the spits and shudders and thrumming of the equipment. With 50 minutes left on Earth, Eddie took his last walk along Ruby Pier. He passed an elderly couple. "Folks," he mumbled, touching his cap. They nodded politely. Customers knew Eddie. At least the regular ones did. They saw him summer after summer, one of those faces you associate with a place. His work shirt had a patch on his chest that read Eddie above the word maintenance. Sometimes they would say, "Hiya, Eddie Maintenance," though he never thought that was funny. Today, it so happened that Eddie's birthday is 83rd. A doctor last week told him he had shingles. Shingles? Eddie didn't even know what they were. Once he had been strong enough to lift a carousel horse in each arm, that was a long time ago. "Eddie, take me, Eddie, take me." 40 minutes until his death, Eddie made his way to the front of the roller coaster line. He rode each attraction at least once a week to be certain that the brakes and steerings were solid. Today was coaster day, the Ghoster Coaster, they called this one. And the kids who knew Eddie yelled to get in the cart with him. Children liked Eddie, not teenagers. Teenagers gave him headaches. Over the years, Eddie figured he's seen every sort of do-nothing, snarl-at-you teenager there was. But children were different. Children looked at Eddie with his protruding lower jaw, always seemed to be grinning like a dolphin, and they trusted him. They drew in like cold hands to a fire. They hugged his leg. They played with his keys. Eddie mostly grunted, never saying much. He figured it was because he didn't say much that they liked him. Now Eddie taped two little boys with backwards baseball caps. They raced to the cart and tumbled in. Eddie handed his cane to the ride attendant and slowly lowered himself in between the two. Here we go, here we go, one boy squealed as the other pulled Eddie's arm around his shoulder. Eddie lowered the lap bar and clack, 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 they went up. A story went around about Eddie. When he was a boy growing up by the same very pier, he got in an alley fight. 5 kids from Pitkin Avenue, Joe, and were about to give him a beating. Eddie was a block away on a stoop eating a sandwich. He heard his brother scream. He ran into the alley, grabbed a garbage can lid, and sent the 2 other boys to the hospital. After that, Joe didn't talk to him for months. He was ashamed. Joe, the oldest, the firstborn. But it was Eddie who did the fighting. Can we go again, Eddie, please? 34 minutes to live. Eddie lifted the lap bar, gave each boy a sucking candy, retrieved his cane, then limped to the maintenance shop to cool down from the summer heat. Had he known his death was immediate, he might have gone somewhere else. Instead, he did what we all do. He went about his dull routine as if all the days in the world were still to come. One of the shop workers, a lanky, bony-cheeked young man named Damaquez, was by the solvent sink wiping off grease off a wheel. Yo, Eddie. Dom, Eddie said. The shop smelled like sawdust. It was dark and cramped with a low ceiling and pegboard walls that held drills and saws and hammers. Skeleton parts of the fun park rides were everywhere. Compressors, engines, belts, light bulbs, the top of a pirate's head, stacking one against the wall were coffee cans of nails and screws, and stacked against another wall were endless tubes of grease. Greasing a track, Eddie would say, required no more brains than washing a dish. The only difference was you got dirtier as you did it, not cleaner. And that was the sort of work that Eddie did. Spread grease, adjusted brakes, tightened bolts, checked electrical panels. Many times he had longed to leave this place, find different work, build another kind of life. But the war came. His plans never worked out. In time, he found himself graying and wearing looser pants and in a state of wary acceptance that this was who he was and who he would always be. A man with sand in his shoes and a world of mechanical laughter and grilled frankfurters. Like his father before him, like the patch on his shirt, Eddie was maintenance, the head of the maintenance, or as the kids called him, the right man at Ruby Pier. 30 minutes left. Hey, happy birthday, I hear. Dominguez said. Eddie grunted. No party or nothing? Eddie looked at him as if he were crazy. For a moment he thought how strange it was to be growing old in a place that smelled of cotton candy. Well, remember, Eddie, I'm off next week, starting Monday going to Mexico. Eddie nodded, and Dominguez did a little dance. Me and Teresa gonna see the whole family party. He stopped dancing and noticed Eddie was staring. You ever been? Dominguez said. Been to Mexico? Eddie exhaled through his nose. Kid, I never been anywhere I wasn't shipped to with a rifle. He watched Dominguez return to the sink. He thought for a moment. Then he took a small wad of bills from his pocket and removed the only two 20s he had, two of them. He held them out. Get your wife something nice, Eddie said. Dominguez regarded the money, broke into a huge smile, and said, come on, man, you sure? Eddie pushed the money into Dominguez's palms. Then he walked out the back to the storage area. A small fishing hole had been cut into the boardwalk planks years ago, and Eddie lifted the plastic cap. He tugged on a nylon line that dropped 80 feet into the sea. A piece of bologna was still attached. Catch anything? Dominguez yelled. Tell me we caught something. Eddie wondered how the guy could be so optimistic. There never was anything on the line. One day, Dominguez said, we're gonna get a halibut. Yep, Eddie mumbled, though he knew he could never pull a fish that big through a hole that small. 26 minutes to live. Eddie crossed the boardwalk to the south end. Business was slow. The girl behind the taffy counter was leaning on her elbows, popping her gum. Once Ruby Pier was the place to go in the summer. It had elephants and fireworks and marathon dancers contests. But people didn't go to the ocean piers much anymore. They went to the theme parks where you paid $75 a ticket and had your photo taken with a giant furry character. Eddie limped past the bumper cars and fixed his eyes on a group of teenagers leaning over the rail. Great, he told himself, just what I need. Off, Eddie said, tapping the railing with his cane. Come on, it's not safe. The teenagers glanced at him. The car poles sizzled with electricity. Zzz, zzz sound. It's not safe, Eddie repeated. The teenagers looked at each other. One kid who wore a streak of orange in his hair sneered at Eddie, then stepped on to the middle rail. Come on, dudes, hit me, he yelled, waving at the young drivers. Hit! Eddie whacked the railing so hard with his cane, he almost snapped in two. Move it! The teenagers ran away. Another story went about Eddie. As a soldier, he had engaged in combat numerous times. He'd been brave. He won a medal. But towards the end of his service, he got into a fight with one of his own men. That's how Eddie was wounded. No one knew what happened to the other guy. No one asked. With 19 minutes left on Earth, Eddie sat for the last time in an old aluminum bench chair, his short, muscled arms folded like seal flappers across his chest. His legs were red from the sun. His left knee still showed scars. In truth, much of Eddie's body suggested a survived encounter. His fingers were bent at awkward angles, thanks to numerous fractures from assorted machinery. His nose had been broken several times in what he called saloon fights. His broadly jawed face might have been good looking once, the way a prize fighter might have looked before he took too many punches. Now Eddie just looked tired. This was his regular spot on the Ruby Pier boardwalk. Behind the Jack Rabbit ride, which in the 1980s was the Thunderbolt, which in the 1970s was the Steel Eel, which in the 1960s was the Lollipop Swings, which in the 1950s was the Laugh in the Dark, and which before that was the Stardust Bandshell, where Eddie met Marguerite. Every line, every life has one true love snapshot. For Eddie, it came on a warm September night after a thunderstorm when the boardwalk was spongy with water. She wore a yellow cotton dress with a pink beret in her hair. Eddie didn't say much. He was so nervous He felt as if his tongue was glued to his teeth. They danced to the music of the big band, Long Legs Danley, and his Everglades Orchestra. Sorry, Long Legs Delaney. He brought her a lemon fizz. She said she had to go before her parents got angry, but she walked away and turned and waved. That was a snapshot. For the rest of his life, whenever he thought of Marguerite, Eddie would see in that moment her waving over her shoulders, her dark hair falling over one eye, and he would feel the same arterial burst of love. And that night, he came home and woke his older brother. He told him he met the girl he was going to marry. Go to sleep, Eddie, his brother groaned. Whoosh! A wave broke on the beach. Eddie coughed up something he didn't want to see. He spat away. Whoosh! He used to think a lot about Marguerite, not so much now. She was like a wound beneath an old bandage, and he had grown more used to the bandage. Whoosh! What was shingles? Whoosh! 60 minutes to live. No story sits by itself. Sometimes stories meet at corners, and sometimes they cover one another completely like stones beneath a river. The end of Eddie's story was touched by another seemingly innocent story months earlier. A cloudy night when a young man arrived at Ruby Pier with 3 of his friends. The young man, whose name was Nicky, had just begun driving and was still not comfortable carrying a keychain. So he removed the single car key and put it in his jacket pocket, and then tied the jacket pocket around his waist. For the next few hours, he and his friends rode the fastest rides, the Flying Falcon, the Splashdown, Ferry's Free Fall, and the Ghoster Coaster. Hands in the air, one of them yelled. They threw their hands in the air. Later, it was dark. They returned to the car lot, exhausted and laughing, drinking beer from brown paper bags. Nicky reached into his jacket pocket. He fished around. He cursed. The key was gone. 14 minutes until his death. Eddie wiped his brow with a handkerchief. Out on the ocean, diamonds of sunlight danced on the water, and Eddie stared at their nimble movement. He had not been right on his feet since the war, but back in the Stardust bandshell with Marguerite, there, Eddie had still been graceful. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to summon the song that brought them together, the one Judy Garland sang in that movie. It mixed his head now with the cacophony of the crashing waves and children screaming on the rides. You made me love you. I do it. I didn't want to do it. Splash. Me love you. Time you knew it and all the shh knew it. Eddie felt her hands on his shoulder. He squeezed his eyes tightly to bring the memory closer. 12 minutes to live. Excuse me. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, stood before him, blocking his sunlight. She had blonde curls and wore flip-flops and denim cut-off shorts and a lime green t-shirt with a cartoon duck on the front. Amy, he thought her name was, Amy or Annie. She'd been here a lot this summer, although Eddie never saw a mother or father. Excuse me, she said again. Eddie, maintenance? Eddie sighed. Just Eddie, he said. Eddie? Uh-huh. Can you make me... She put her hands together as if she was praying. Come on, kiddo, I don't have all day. Can you make me an animal? Can you? Eddie looked up as if he had to think about it. Then he reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a yellow pipe cleaner. And which he carried for just this purpose. Yes, the little girl said, slapping her hands together. Eddie began twisting the pipe cleaners. Where are your parents? Riding the rides. Without you? The girl shrugged. My mom's with her boyfriend. Eddie looked up. Oh. He bent the pipe cleaners into several small loops and then twisted the loops around one another. His hands shook now, so it took longer than it used to. But soon the pipe cleaners resembled a head, ears, body, and tail. A rabbit? The little girl said. Eddie winked. Thank you. She spun away, lost in that place where kids don't even know their feet are moving. Eddie wiped his brow again, then closed his eyes, slumping into the beach chair, and tried to get the old song back into his head. The seagulls squawked as it flew overhead. How do people choose their final words? Do they realize their gravity? Are they fated to be wise? By his 83rd birthday, Eddie had lost nearly everyone he cared about. Someone had died young, and some had died young, and some had been given a chance to grow old before a disease or an accident took them away. At their funerals, Eddie listened as mourners recalled their final conversations. It's as if he knew he was going to die, some would say. Eddie never believed that. As far as he could tell, when your time came, it came, and that was that. You might say something smart on your way out, but you easily just might say something stupid. For the record, Eddie's final words would be, get back. Here are the sounds of Eddie's last minutes on Earth. Waves crashing, the distant thump of rock music, the whirling engine of a small biplane, dragging an ad from its tail, and this. Oh my God, look! Eddie felt his eyes dart beneath his lids. Over the years, he came to know every noise at Ruby Pier and could sleep through them all like a lullaby. This voice was not in a lullaby. Oh my God, look! Eddie bolted right up. A woman with fat, dimpled arms was holding a shopping bag and pointing and screaming. A crowd gathered around her, her eyes to the skies. Eddie saw it immediately. Atop Freddy's Freefall, the new tower drop attraction, one of the carts was tilted at an angle, as if trying to dump its cargo. 4 passengers, 2 men, 2 women, held only a safety bar, were grabbing frantically at anything they could. "Oh my God," the fat woman yelled. "Those people, they're gonna fall." A voice squawked from Eddie's radio bell. "Eddie, Eddie." He pressed the button. "I see it, get security." People ran up from the beach, pointing as if they had practiced this drill. Look up in the sky. An amusement park ride turned evil." Eddie grabbed his cane and climbed to the safety fence around the platform base, his wadded keys jangling against his hips. His heart was racing. Freddy's Freefall was supposed to drop 2 carts in a stomach-churning descent, only to be halted at the last instance by a gush of hydraulic air. How did one cart come loose like that? It was tilted just a few feet below the upper platform, as if it had started downward, then changed its mind. Eddie reached the gate and had to catch his breath. Dominguez came running and nearly banged into him. "Listen to me," Eddie said, grabbing Dominguez by his shoulders. His grip was so tight. Dominguez had a pained face. "Listen to me. Who's up there?" "Willie." "Okay. He must have hit the energy stop. That's why the cart is hanging. Get up to the ladder and tell Willie to manually release the safety restraint so those people can get out, okay? It is on the back of the cart. So you're gonna have to hold him while he leans out there, okay? Then the two of you, now, not one. You got it? The 2 of you, get them out. One holds the other. Got it? Got it?" Dominguez nodded quickly. "Then send the damn cart down so we can figure out what happened." Eddie's head was pounding. Although his park had been free of any major accidents, he knew the horror stories of his business. Once in Brighton, a bolt of unfastened on the gondola ride, and 2 people fell to their death. Another time, in Wonderland Park, a man had tried to walk across a roller coaster track. He fell through and got stuck beneath his armpits. He was wedged in, screaming, and the cars came racing toward him, and well, that was the worst. Eddie pushed that from his mind. There were people all around him now, hands over their mouths, watching Dominguez climb the ladder. Eddie tried to remember the insides of Freddy's Freefall: engine, cylinders, hydraulics, seals, cables. How does one car come loose? He followed the ride visually from the 4 frightened people at the top of the ride to the towering shift to the base. Engine, cylinders, hydraulic seals, cables. Dominguez reached the upper platform. He did as Eddie told him, holding Willie as Willie leaned toward the back of the car. to release the restraint, one of the female riders lunged for Willie and nearly pulled him off the platform. The crowd gasped. "Wait," Eddie said. Willie tried again. This time, he popped the safety release. "Cable," Eddie mumbled. The bar lifted, and the crowd went, "Ah!" As the riders were being pulled from the platform. "The cable is unraveling." As Eddie was right. Inside the base of Freddy's Freefall, hidden from the view, the cable that lifted cart number 2 had for the last few months been scraping across, and a locked pulley, because it was locked, the pulley had gradually ripped the cable steel wires as if the husking of an ear corn until they were nearly severed. No one noticed. How could they notice? Only someone who had crawled inside the mechanisms would have seen the unlikely cause of the problem. The pulley was wedged by a small object that must have fallen through the opening of a most precise moment, a car key. "Don't release the cart," Eddie yelled. He waved his arm. Hey, it's the cable. Don't release the cart. It'll snap." The crowd drawn to him. It cheered as wildly as Willie and Dominguez unloaded the final rider. And the 4 were safe. They hugged atop the platform. "Dom! Willie!" Eddie yelled. Someone banged his wrist, knocking his walkie-talkie to the ground. Eddie bent to get it. Willie went to the controls. As he put his finger on the green button, Eddie looked up. No, don't!" Eddie turned to the crowd. "Get back!" Something in Eddie's voice must have caught the people's attention. They stopped cheering and began to scatter. An opening cleared around the bottom of Freddy's Freefall, and Eddie saw the last face of his life. She was sprawled upon the ride's metal base as if someone had knocked her into it. Her nose running tears, lifting her eyes. The little girl with the pipe cleaner animal, Amy Annie. Mom, she haved almost rhythmically as her body frozen in the parallels of crying children. Mom. Eddie's eyes shot from her to the carts. He didn't have time. Her to the carts. Whoop! Too late. The cart was dropping. Jesus. He released the brake. And as for Eddie, everything slipped into watery motion. As he dropped his cane, pushed off his bad leg, and felt a shot of pain that almost knocked him down. A big step and another big step. In the shaft of Freddy's Freefall, the cable snapped, its final thread, and ripped across the hydraulic line. Cart number 2 was now in dead drop now. Nothing could stop it. A boulder off a cliff. In these final moments, Eddie seemed to hear the whole world, distant screaming waves, music, and a rush of wind, a low, loud, ugly sound that he realized was his own voice blasting through his chest. The little girl raised her arms. Eddie lunged. His bad leg buckled. He half flew, half stumbled toward her, landing on the metal platform, which ripped through his shirt and split open his skin beneath the patch that read A Manus. He felt 2 hands in his own 2 small hands. A stunning impact, a bonding flashlight, and then nothing. Today is Eddie's birthday. It is 1920s, a crowded hospital in one of the poorest sections of the city. A's father smoked cigarettes in the waiting room where the other fathers are also smoking cigarettes. The nurse enters with the clipboard. She calls his name. She mispronounces it. The other men blow smoke. Well, he raised his hands. Congratulations, the nurse says. He follows her down the hallway to the newborn's nursery. His shoes clap on the floor. Wait here, she says. Through the glass, he sees her check the numbers of the wooden cribs. She moves past one, not his, another, not his, another, not his, another, not his. She stops there beneath the blanket, a tiny head covered in a blue cap. She checks her clipboard again, then points. The father breathes heavily, nods his head, and for a moment, his face seems to crumble like a bridge collapsing into water. He smiles. Well, that's the end of chapter 1. I'll do chapter 2. Tomorrow night, Saturday night. The night of tonight. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the book so far. This is only the first chapter, but regardless if you're a believer or not, this is a great book. And this really talks about, how you should live life to its fullest because you only have one life. And in the words of famous founding father, one of the many, I regret that I only have one life to give to my country. We only have one life. And that's what this book is about. It's sad, but it's also funny at the same time. And even if there is something after life, I don't know. But from what I'm gathering, Mitch Albom is saying that heaven is our own. We don't know what our own heaven is going to be. Mine could be different from yours. Yours could be different from mine. But it seems like he's basing it on our life experience. And I won't give you any more details about the book because it's a great story. Hope you guys enjoy.